Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive with us. This time we're tackling how to make the most of single life. You guys sent us this text, how can you thrive in singleness?
Mm.
With those 3 life-changing habits. And it really got me thinking. It kind of flips the script on how we usually view being single.
Yeah.
Instead of just like waiting around for marriage,
Yeah.
It's like this time is so valuable to grow closer to God and to make a real difference in the world.
Exactly. It really challenges that whole holding pattern mentality a lot of people have, that we tend to put on singleness, like we're just kind of waiting for the next thing.
Right.
But what's cool about this text is that it really reframes this time as
Yeah.
a unique opportunity, a time to really launch into spiritual growth and service.
Totally. It's about living your best life now, not waiting for someday.
Mhm.
And so the first habit that the text dives into is being active. And it even pulls from Ecclesiastes, that verse, whatever your hand finds to do it with all your might.
Mhm.
But it's not just about being busy. It's about figuring out what God wants you to do specifically during this time. Like he might have these unique plans for you during your single years. It's like he's preparing you for something bigger.
Mm.
'Cause how do you think someone would even start to figure out what those plans are?
Well, that's where things get interesting. The text talks about spending time in prayer and not just, talking at God, but actually taking the time to listen for his direction. And it also says we should seek guidance from mentors or spiritual leaders, people who know you well and can help you kind of connect your passions with God's purpose for you.
Oh, that's a great point. It's like having a spiritual GPS, you know,
Yeah.
helping you navigate this season with intention. And then the text goes on to give us these concrete examples
Yeah.
of how to actually be active, like learning a new skill or trying out that hobby you've always wanted to do. It even mentions volunteering and getting plugged in at your local church.
Mhm.
It seems like the key is to really actively participate in life. Like be present, be grateful for the opportunities God gives you right now.
Yeah, I think the coolest part about this whole idea of being active is that it changes the focus from waiting to partnering. Like when you actively use your gifts, you're opening yourself up to God's leading.
Yeah.
And that's where the real growth happens. And actually, the text even shares the story about an 80-year-old woman
Oh, wow.
in Nigeria who leads the security team
What?
for this huge church.
Seriously.
It's a good reminder that there's no age limit on serving God and making a difference.
That's incredible. If she can do that at 80, I mean, what's our excuse, right? It definitely puts things in perspective. Makes you think about how you're spending your time and your energy. So, moving on to the second habit, the text talks about investing. And not just in a financial sense, but in yourself and in others.
Right.
It says we should use our income wisely, buy books, attend seminars, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it also mentions traveling and experiencing different cultures. I feel like sometimes we forget those things can be investments too.
Oh, absolutely. Think about it when you learn a new skill or dive into a new subject through books. It broadens your horizons.
Yeah.
It's like adding all these new colors to your palette.
I like that.
And that growth makes you a more well-rounded person.
Yeah.
And that affects every part of your life, including your relationships.
It's true. It's not selfish to invest in yourself. It's actually a way to better equip yourself to love and serve others. And the text brings up Lydia as an example. You know the seller of purple?
Oh, yeah.
She was a successful businesswoman, but she used her resources to support Paul and Silas.
Mm.
And her home even became the meeting place for the first church in Europe.
That's right. Lydia's story is so inspiring because it shows how singleness can be a time to make a huge impact.
For sure.
She had a heart for God and for people, and she used everything she had to further the gospel.
It's so cool to see examples in the Bible of single people who are out there making such a difference. It really challenges the idea that you have to be married to have a meaningful life.
Yeah, I think what we see is that God can use every season of our lives for his purposes. And singleness, with its unique freedoms, allows us to really focus on our relationship with him, grow in our faith, and use our gifts to bless others in ways that might not be possible later on.
That's so true. So the third habit the text talks about is being mindful of your company. It really stresses how important it is to surround yourself with positive influences. You know people who will uplift you and encourage you in your walk with Christ.
Right. It reminds me of that proverb, "He who walks with wise men becomes wise, but the companion of fools suffers harm."
Wow.
And it's not just about avoiding those negative influences, but also actively seeking out people who will challenge you to grow, who share your values, and who inspire you to live a life that honors God.
And the text is clear that It's not about isolating yourself, like out of fear of bad influences. It's about being proactive and seeking out those positive connections.
That's right. It's like building a garden. You know you want to create an environment where healthy things can grow.
Yeah.
So you pick your plants carefully, you nurture them, and you weed out anything that could stop them from thriving. And in the same way, we want to be intentional about the relationships we nurture.
That's such a good analogy. So we've got these three main habits: being active, investing in yourself and others, and watching your company.
Hmm.
But there's this one more point in the text that really stood out to me. It's almost like a bonus habit. And it's all about trusting God with our deepest desires, especially that longing for marriage.
Yeah.
For a lot of single people, that desire can feel so big,
Yeah.
and it's easy to let it overshadow everything else.
Absolutely. You're right, that longing for companionship. It's a natural and beautiful part of being human.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that the text encourages us to hold that desire with open hands, trusting that God's timing isn't always our own.
Right, it's like that verse in Ecclesiastes. There's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. It's like God's plan is bigger than our timeline.
Exactly.
And he's working things out even when we can't see the whole picture.
Mm.
But trusting him in that waiting, it can be really tough.
It definitely requires a shift in perspective. Like instead of viewing singleness as just a waiting room for marriage, the text says we should see it as a unique season with its own purpose and beauty.
Yeah.
It's about embracing the present moment, finding joy in our relationship with God, and using this time to grow in ways we might not be able to later on.
That's a powerful way to look at it.
Yeah.
But how do we actually cultivate that trust and joy while we're waiting?
Well, this is where those other habits we talked about come in. By being active, investing in ourselves, and surrounding ourselves with good people, we're creating a life that's rich and fulfilling no matter what our relationship status is. We're focusing on becoming the best versions of ourselves,
Right.
which ultimately prepares us for any future God has planned.
I love that. It's about living a life of purpose and intention, not just marking time until something else happens.
Exactly. And it's important to acknowledge that the desire for marriage is a good thing. It's God-given, and there's nothing wrong with wanting it. But the key is to not let it consume us or dictate our happiness.
Right. The text even talks about being the good odor of Christ, spreading his love wherever we go, whether we're single or married. How do you interpret that phrase?
It's a beautiful picture, isn't it? Think about baking bread. The aroma fills the whole house, and it invites everyone in.
Yeah.
That's how our lives should be, drawing others to Christ through our joy, our kindness, our genuine love for others.
Wow, that's a great analogy. It's about letting our lives reflect the goodness and love of God, no matter our circumstances. So as we're wrapping up this deep dive, what's one key takeaway that you hope our listeners will walk away with today?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is that singleness isn't a problem to be solved, but a season to be embraced. It's a time for growth, for service, for deepening our relationship with God.
Yeah.
It's about trusting his plan, finding joy in the present moment, and living a life that reflects his love to the world.
That's beautifully said. And I think it's a message that resonates with all of us, no matter what stage of life we're in. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into thriving in singleness. We hope it's encouraged you to embrace this season with all its challenges and opportunities. And hey, we've got more to unpack, so make sure to tune in for part 2 of our deep dive. We'll be back soon.
See you then.
Okay, so we're back. And in the last part, we were talking about trusting God with our desire for marriage, and how singleness is like its own unique season with its own purpose.
Right. It's not just about waiting for marriage. It's about using this time to really grow and serve God.
Yeah, and the text actually gives us some super practical tips on how to do that. It encourages us to be active with our time and talents, and to invest in ourselves so we can better invest in others, and to be careful about the company we keep.
Yeah, those are all great points.
But you know what I'm really curious about? Is how do we actually put these habits into practice? How do we take these ideas and make them a reality in our everyday lives?
That's a great question. And I think the text gives us some clues. For example, when it comes to being active, it encourages us to see this season as a time of preparation.
Okay.
God has specific assignments for us to tackle while we're single.
So it's not just about filling our time.
Yeah.
But about partnering with God in his work.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that every step we take, every action we choose, can be an act of worship if it's aligned with his purpose for our lives.
Wow, that's powerful. But it can also feel kind of daunting. How do we even know what those specific assignments are?
Right. Well, the text talks about starting with prayer, and not just a quick bless this food kind of prayer,
Yeah.
but intentional time spent listening for God's voice.
Hmm.
It's about seeking his wisdom and being open to his leading, even if it takes us in unexpected directions.
So it's not about having all the answers.
Hmm.
It's about being willing to ask the questions and then listen for his response.
Exactly. And the text also encourages us to seek counsel from wise mentors or spiritual leaders. You know people who have walked with God for a long time, who know you well and can offer guidance and support.
That's a good point. It's like we don't have to figure it all out on our own. God has placed people in our lives who can help us navigate this journey.
Absolutely. And then once we have a sense of direction, it's time to take action.
Okay.
The text gives us some practical examples like learning a new skill, exploring a hobby, volunteering, getting involved in our church.
Right.
These are all ways to actively engage in life, to use our gifts, and to make a difference in the world around us.
I love that. And I love how the text emphasizes that our contributions matter, no matter how small they might seem.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we don't have to have it all figured out or be in a certain position to make a difference.
Exactly. It's about being faithful with what's in front of us. Remember that 80-year-old woman leading security at the church in Nigeria?
Oh, yeah?
She didn't let age or circumstance limit her. She simply said yes to God. And he used her in a powerful way.
That's so inspiring. All right, so let's move on to that second habit, investing in ourselves and others. This one really hit home for me because I think sometimes as single people, we can feel this pressure to pour all our time and energy into serving others, and we forget to take care of ourselves.
That's true. And the text challenges that imbalance by reminding us that we can't pour from an empty cup.
Right.
It encourages us to prioritize our own growth and development so that we can better serve and love others.
Yeah, I like how the text frames it as an investment, not just spending money, but investing our time and resources in things that enrich our minds, expand our horizons, and help us become more well-rounded individuals.
Exactly. It talks about being intentional with our income. Maybe that means setting aside money for books or online courses, attending conferences or workshops, or even investing in experiences that broaden our perspectives, like traveling or learning a new language.
I've always wanted to learn Italian. Maybe that's my next investment. But I also love how the text connects investing in ourselves to investing in others.
Yeah.
It's not about becoming self-absorbed. It's about becoming the best version of ourselves so that we can impact the world in a positive way.
It's like that saying, you can't give what you don't have.
Right.
The more we invest in our own growth, the more we have to offer others. It's like planting a seed. You nurture it, you water it, you give it sunlight, and then it bears fruit.
And that fruit can then nourish others. That's beautiful.
And speaking of beautiful, remember Lydia, the seller of purple?
Oh, yeah.
She was a successful businesswoman who clearly knew the value of investing in herself and in others. She used her resources to support the ministry of Paul and Silas, and her home became the first church in Europe. Imagine the impact she had on the people around her, simply because she was willing to open her heart and her home.
Her story is such an inspiration. It's a reminder, but we don't have to wait for marriage or some other life event to start making a difference. We can use the resources we have right now to bless others and further God's kingdom.
Absolutely. And finally, let's talk about that third habit, watching our company. This one is so crucial because as the text points out, we become like the people we spend time with. Their values, their habits, their outlook on life, it all rubs off on us whether we realize it or not.
So it's not enough to just avoid negative influences. We also need to be proactive about surrounding ourselves with people who will challenge us to grow, who will encourage us in our faith, and who will inspire us to live a life that honors God.
Right. It's like choosing your inner circle wisely. You want people who will speak truth into your life, who will support you in your journey, and who will point you back to Jesus when you stray.
And I love how the text emphasizes the importance of balance. It's not about isolating ourselves from the world out of fear of bad influences. It's about being discerning about who we allow to speak into our lives, while also being open to building meaningful relationships with people who share our values.
Yeah, it's about creating a healthy ecosystem where we can flourish. Surround yourself with people who will water your soul, not drain it.
That's such a great visual. So we've covered a lot of ground today, being active, investing in ourselves and others, and choosing our company wisely. But ultimately, I think it all boils down to one fundamental truth: trusting God with our desires and making the most of this unique season of life.
It's about recognizing that singleness isn't a waiting room for something better, but an opportunity to grow closer to God, to serve him with passion, and to become the best version of ourselves.
And I love how the text leaves us with this thought-provoking question. How can you make each step of your journey joyful and take intentional actions to make it so?
Hmm.
That's such a powerful challenge. It's not about just surviving singleness,
Mm.
but about truly thriving in it.
Yeah, it's about finding the joy in the journey, not just the destination.
So, as you continue exploring these ideas,
Mm.
we encourage you to really consider that question. What steps can you take today, right now, to make your journey a joyful one? Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. We'll be back soon with part 3. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive. And I'm excited to really get practical here. What I love about this text is that it doesn't just leave us with high-level concepts. It gives us actual steps we can take.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like having a
Yeah.
toolbox filled with resources.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
let's start with that first habit, being active. The text talks about seeing this season as a time of preparation, almost like God has these assignments for us, specific things he wants us to do while we're single.
Right. It's not just about filling our time. It's about working with God,
Yeah.
partnering with him in his work.
That's so good. But it can also feel a little overwhelming. Like, how do we even figure out what those assignments are?
Well, the text suggests starting with prayer. And I don't mean just like a quick prayer before meals, but really taking time to listen for God's voice,
Okay.
seeking his wisdom and being open to his leading, even if it takes us in directions we weren't expecting.
So it's not about having all the answers, but being willing to ask the questions
Yeah,
and then really listening for his response.
exactly. And it also encourages us to ask for advice from mentors or spiritual leaders, people who have a strong relationship with God, who know us well and can offer guidance.
Yeah, that's so helpful. It's like we don't have to do this alone. God puts people in our lives to help us on this journey.
Exactly. And once we have some sense of direction, then it's time to take action.
Okay, so what does that look like?
Well, the text gives us some practical examples, like learning a new skill, exploring a hobby, volunteering at our church.
Right.
These are ways to really engage with life, to use our gifts and make a difference.
I love how the text emphasizes that every little bit counts, like our contributions matter, even if they seem small.
Yeah, we don't have to have it all figured out to make a difference. Remember that 80-year-old woman leading security in Nigeria?
Oh, yeah, that was amazing.
She didn't let anything hold her back. She said yes to God, and he used her in a powerful way.
So inspiring. Okay, so let's talk about the second habit, investing in ourselves and others. I think this is so important because sometimes as single people, we can feel pressured to give all our time to others, and we forget to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, the text reminds us that we can't pour from an empty cup.
Right.
We need to make our own growth a priority so we can better love and serve others.
I like how the text frames it as an investment, like putting time and resources into things that make us better people, things that help us grow and learn.
Exactly. It talks about being intentional with our money, like setting some aside for books, online courses, or conferences, or even experiences that broaden our perspective, like travel.
Oh, I've always wanted to learn to speak Italian. Maybe that's my next investment. But I also love how it connects investing in ourselves with investing in others. It's not about being selfish. It's about becoming the best version of ourselves so we can have a positive impact on the world.
Right. The more we grow, the more we have to offer. It's like planting a seed. You nurture it, you water it, you give it sunshine, and then it blossoms.
And then that blossom can provide for others. That's so beautiful.
Speaking of which, remember Lydia, the seller of purple. She was a successful businesswoman who clearly knew the value of investing. She used her resources to support Paul and Silas, and her home became the first church in Europe.
Wow, what an impact.
It shows that we don't need to wait to start making a difference.
You could use what we have right now.
To bless others and to help spread the gospel.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so let's move on to the third habit, watching our company. This one's so key because the people we surround ourselves with really influence us.
Right. The text says we become like the people we spend time with. Their values, their habits, their outlook on life, it all rubs off on us.
So we need to be picky about who we let into our lives and actively seek out people who will challenge us to grow in our faith.
Yeah, it's like choosing your inner circle. You want people who will speak truth into your life, people who will support you and point you back to Jesus.
And I love that the text talks about balance. It's not about isolating ourselves from the world completely, but being thoughtful about who we let influence us.
Exactly. It's about creating a healthy environment for ourselves. Surround yourself with people who will lift you up.
That's such a great way to put it. So we've covered a lot in this deep dive. Being active, investing in ourselves and others, and choosing our company wisely. And I think it all comes down to one thing: trusting God with our desires and making the most of this season of life.
It's about seeing singleness as a time for growth and service. a time to draw closer to God and become the best version of ourselves.
And I love how the text ends with this question. How can you make each step of your journey joyful and take intentional actions to make it so?
Hmm.
That's a challenge for all of us. It's not about just getting through singleness, but about really thriving in it.
It's about enjoying the journey.
So as we wrap up today, I encourage you to think about that question. What can you do today to make this segment of your life a joyful one? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it's been helpful and encouraging. Until next time.